It was a really interesting creative process getting Omar Daniel's concerto written. Omar and I go back a long way. He's a terrific composer, but he's sort of worn a lot of hats in his career. He was the producer for a couple of recordings that I've done, and he does some engineering. I mean, he's a good guitarist, so all kinds of things. So I had it in mind on the one hand to try and find a project that he and I could work together on, and as music director of the Hamilton Philharmonic, it was a really important part of our mandate there to commission a lot of young composers and try and not only get pieces written, but find a lot of opportunities to play them. So actually, for that reason, it's great to be able to bring it back out here in Vancouver. So when I brought up the idea to him, obviously the complicating thing is, how do you conduct and play the French horn at the same time? A lot of people might have seen pianists do this or violinists, which of course you need two hands for those as well. but if you sort of picture somebody playing the violin or the piano, everything you hear is visible, you know, so you can see the bow move and you can see their fingers move. So for the orchestra, it's relatively easy to follow. And the piano, similarly, you know, you can see their arms, and for that matter, they can like wave one around. But the horn is definitely two-handed. And not only that, if you try to take one hand off, it really throws things off. So, so that was the challenge for Omar, is how to write a piece that I could play and would have challenges for me to play, but you know, the orchestra and the solo wouldn't end up sort of heading in different directions all the time. So he came up with some really ingenious ideas. The piece opens with a kind of a cadenza, which is very free for horn and percussion, and eventually brass instruments come in. But the way he notated it was ingenious, and he writes everybody's parts into everybody else's parts so we can kind of follow each other by ear. And then the more sustaining sections of the piece, where everybody's playing, including me, he writes all of that in a steady tempo. So once we kind of get it wound up, you know, like then I don't have to worry. Like I don't have to be a traffic cop once the light's green, if you know what I mean. So yeah, when we premiered it, and we were fortunate enough to get granting help from the Canada Council, and we premiered it in Hamilton in 2012, and it was a great success. It was fun, and it's great to be able to do it again. It does raise some interesting challenges to, I mean, not just in the way that we play when we're playing music from the Baroque period and the classical period and, you know, last year, but also in terms of rehearsal, because so we're doing this program which is really varied in terms of the periods that the pieces were written, and the orchestra's just coming off a week when they're doing one piece, playing the Mahler Ninth, which is a great sprawling thing, all written, you know, about 100 years ago. So it's in the rehearsal process, the challenge for them as players and for me as a conductor is, how do you make all of these discrete approaches work? Like, so in other words, how do you just kind of shift gears all of a sudden from playing in a Baroque style, which is say you're a string player, that it's lighter, it's very creative and varied in terms of the articulation, you vibrate less. So, I mean, it's kind of like when you compare Handel to Mahler, let's say, it's much more kind of like spoken, you know, like every note has a little bit different inflection. It's kind of like a conversation all the time, where Mahler tends to be more like a big song, you know. And then when you get to Mozart, then that has its own character as well. You know, Mozart is always so full of fire and spark, and so you have to kind of find that classical balance between like a real driving rhythm, really singing lines. So actually, it's challenging, but these are the kind of challenges I think that all musicians love to have. You know, I mean, these are all the things that you love about music, that you love about playing. So certainly in the time we've had. I mean, the orchestra here has really risen to that challenge. It's really great to hear. There are a number of factors that go into programming any week, and it's always kind of a jigsaw puzzle because it depends on not just the specific group of people that we have available, the personnel of the orchestra, but also what pieces have been done during the last season or maybe are planned for next season, and the things that I like to do. So when we put it together, I mean, in the end, it's funny because if you don't know these pieces and you see Handel, Ravel, Mozart, Daniel, and it seems a bit like, like a buffet with dishes from all over the place. But actually, in terms of the sound and the musical approach of all these pieces, there are a lot of commonalities between them, which does have partly to do with the size of the orchestra, but there's a kind of transparency and brilliance to all these pieces. And then, in a certain way, I kind of gravitate towards this kind of storytelling aspect. So the Ravel, of course, it's all fairy tales, and they're all, I mean, some of the pieces that we play are exact, it's like looking at a cartoon, like it tells the story exactly. So the one that's Beauty and the Beast, you hear the beautiful girl dancing, and then you hear this very awkward sounding beast played on the contrabassoon, and then they get together, and then she kisses him, and there's this beautiful little harp line, and then he turns into a prince, which is played on the violin. So it's all, it's very beautifully told, just simply in music. And there are similar things in all of the pieces that we play. So so that's the thread. But really, in the end, it's largely about beautiful music that happens to line up well. I mean, I guess it is kind of like a big meal, with about 7 or 8 courses, but hopefully they're well planned, and it kind of gets you through to dessert in the right frame of mind.